Story number 2. Creeper in the Woods. This happened about 13 years ago, when I was a sophomore in college, attending a liberal arts school in Suffolk County, New York. Within the first month or two of my freshman year, I found myself in a very tight-knit group of fellow theatre geeks, 6 guys including myself and 1 girl, and they all loved horror movies and ghost stories. I found my crew, freshman year, was tough, but we all held each other up and made the whole experience more enjoyable for one another. At the beginning of the sophomore year, we decided that in October, as the Halloween season was ramping up, we would find a creepy, wooded spot in a nearby town some night and scare the crap out of ourselves. We did some research and found that there was a particular isolated area about 30 minutes away. Infamous for paranormal sightings, perfect. The 7 of us split up into 2 different cars and headed out that night. Allow me to set the scene. You turn off a main road, flooded with strip malls and restaurants and whatnot, and you're almost immediately greeted with complete darkness. Again, this area is very heavily wooded, so it was essential a large web of winding roads surrounded by trees. Very few streetlights and very few houses. Without a GPS or a good sense of direction, one could easily get lost in there. We all made sure we have fully charged phones and flashlights just in case, but the goal was to keep driving until we collectively decided to pull over and go exploring. So per the directions, we made a left off the main road, driving for 30 minutes or so in this dark network, picking directions at random, just getting intentionally lost. Our cars made a turn, and to our surprise, there was a huge log in front of us. We had reached a dead end of some kind, and nothing but trees beyond it. We all got out to see what exactly this was, stepped over the log, and noticed 2 narrow trails leading in different directions. This seemed as good a time as any to grab our flashlights and do some amateur ghost hunting. We flipped a coin and set off on the trails to the right. The trail was so narrow that we had to walk in single file to avoid getting whacked by branches. For whatever reason, I ended up at the back. I'm usually pretty rational and level-headed, but I have to say, the further we went, the more I was overcome with an uneasy feeling. I kept hearing sounds deep in the woods, unable to shake the feeling we were being watched. But I seemed to be the only one who heard these things, so I struggled and shrugged it off as my imagination. And in any case, the whole point of us being there was to get scared, not to mention the fact that we were only 7 able-bodied college students. What would we come across that could take us down? We headed down this trail for about 20 minutes, and just when I thought it would never end, we came to a massive clearing, and I mean massive. It was large, open, and unkempt grass, comparable in scope to a golf course, but not nearly as well manicured. Trees surrounding the entire field, which was so large, we could not see the end of it from where we were. Standing, I was thrilled to get out of the narrow trail, but I don't think any of us were expecting to find an area so vast. One of us looked to the right and said, "Hey, check that out." We all turned, and there was an old dilapidated house, several hundred yards away. The house was completely dark, with no cars or signs of anyone actually living there. We walked over and shined our flashlights at it, and sure enough, the windows and doors were all boarded up. I managed to peer between the boards on one of the windows, and what I could see was an old white couch covered with plastic, but an otherwise empty room. Whoever used to live here, they were long gone. Because there was no way in, and because we all felt sufficiently creeped out by the house anyway, we decided to walk closer to the trail we had come from, have a seat in the field, and figure out where to go next. We walked towards the narrow trail, but before we could sit, my friend Mark stopped. What he was doing, his expression dropped and he pointed. We all turned. On the very far side of the field, directly across from where we came in, we could see some tall, lanky, and pale dancing among the trees. And by dancing, I mean it was skipping around, grabbing a tree, swinging around it, and then doing the same thing with another tree. Basically a doosey-do. The moon was so bright and the woods so dark, it actually took a second for us to really understand what we were seeing. Jay, the 6'4" skeptic of the group, wasn't seeing it. I leaned into him, pointing in the direction, and says, "Jay, look where I'm pointing. Don't you see that?" He squinted for a bit, and the second that he saw it, he gasped with everything he had, clutched my arm, and whispered, "What the fuck is that?" What happened next sent shockwaves through all of us. Whoever this was, they stopped dancing, looked in our direction, and started charging straight at us. Without even thinking, we freaked and run back to the trail. Yet again, Jay was the only one who didn't see what was happening. He shouted after us, "Guys, what is it? Where are you going?" After about 15 seconds of running like hell, I heard Jay shout, "Holy shit." I looked back and saw his flashlight was following the rest of us into the trail. While the walk into the woods took about 20 minutes, we made it back to our two cars and hopped in. We were peeling away in closer to 5. Once we were a safe distance away, we pulled over, got out and checked in with each other about what just happened. My heart was pounding, and I know everyone else was feeling the same way. Nearly 15 years later, we all still friends, living in different states, yet keep it in touch through marriages, divorces, children, etc. But occasionally, out of the blue, one of us sends a group text to the others, something to the effect of, "The woods, that really happened, right?" It most certainly did. That experience is always in the back of my mind, and I'm pretty sure it always will be. Here's the thing that still resonates with me about that night. Whoever that was, they were dancing manically in the woods at 1 in the morning, and then ran directly at a group of young adults, not at all fazed by the fact there were several of us severely outnumbering them. Did he know we were there from the second we parked? Was he the sounds I kept hearing when we walked the trail? Whatever the case may be, when he came for us that night, you can be sure none of us wanted to stick around and see what he was truly capable of. So thanks for listening, guys, and if you did enjoy the content, please leave a like below and subscribe to the channel. Also hit the notification bell, as I'm making regular uploads, just so you know when new stories are uploaded. Thanks. Super crew, how are you? just looking at a new story to post, but before we go into that, please could you support the channel by subscribing and liking and also leaving a comment below. Also, if you have time, just go back and search for my channel name. There's Reaper_Real, just to get the boost, just to get the searches up and make my channel a bit easier to find. I appreciate this if you do. And now into the story. We got lost in a forest, and it was one of the strangest experiences in my life. The following is a story that took place quite a few years back now. However, it still baffles me completely, and I'd like to share it here. I'm a teenager, and I've been Boy Scouts for nearly all my life, and I really enjoy exploring with my friends and being trusted more. As I'm older now, a few years ago, me and two girls named Amy and Harriet were asked to head into the woods surrounding our campsite to find a long, straight stick suitable for carving into a point. Bear in mind that I was a lot younger back then. Harriet was older, and Amy only 1 year older than myself. We had been walking in deliberately the same direction as not to get lost, and memorising the surroundings as we went, in order to find our way back easily. About 15 minutes in, we couldn't find anything to take back, so we turned around to return to the campsite. That's the initial panic set in. The trees had almost unnaturally knitted themselves together in such a way that it seemed our paths were non-existent in the first place, like it had just vanished. We looked around 360 degrees, and now everything looked exactly the same. Trees we could have sworn were different from one another appeared as they are copies of the same tree. We kept walking in what we thought was the correct direction, while shouting out for help, and eventually came onto a concrete path, almost like a road, but very thin, separating the forest, splitting into two. We didn't follow the road, as it went in the wrong direction to our campsite. On the other side of the path was more forest. However, nearby was an abandoned shack, likely used for storage or whatever else. We had no idea anything like this was out here in these woods. So we just kept walking and eventually came to the road we didn't recognize. A woman wearing a pink and purple regatta outdoors coat walked past, and we frantically asked her for directions to our campsite. As by now, according to our watches and Harriet's phone, we'd been walking for an hour and a half. She said she'd never seen us before, but she said there's another campsite in that direction. We followed her advice and eventually came back to our campsite. We frantically apologized for being so long, that we couldn't find anything. The leader, Ian, could see all three of us were shaken up, and he started confused that we'd only been gone for 25 minutes, and that our free time was still going on. To this day, this baffles all three of us, as our free time was 40 minutes long, and our watches and phones had said we'd been gone for hours. The forest we were lost in felt crushing and claustrophobic, like we'd entered an area that had no concept of time. I believe in the paranormal. However, this was so unlike anything I've heard of or experienced before. It literally was like we'd been in the time vortex or something, and that hours in the forest were only minutes in the rest of the world. The feeling was very strange, and it stuck with me for the rest of the camp. Thanks for reading my story. It's a weird one, but it's true. If you would like to hear more stories like this, about my weird life, then feel free to upvote and comment.